Hello and welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman. Today is an episode in our AI case study series, and I'm so happy to welcome my friend and one of the founding members of Umbrex, Astrid Malval-Beharry. Astrid, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Will. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm so grateful to be part of the Umbrex community. This is exciting to be talking to you today.
Thank you. You've been part of the community since the very beginning, so many years ago. Astrid, it's great having you on the show. I know you are an InsurTech consultant focused on the InsurTech industry. Walk us through your case study.
Absolutely. It will be my pleasure. So this particular case study involves a top 50 homeowners insurance carrier in the US. And I was approached by their underwriting and innovation teams to help them digitally transform their underwriting workflow. Maybe for context, Will, for our audience, I'll give kind of a quick high-level overview of the homeowners insurance industry in the US. And I think it will help to have that context for what my client was looking to achieve. But it's about a $134 billion in premiums industry. There are thousands of insurers, but it's actually a fairly concentrated market. So the top 25 carriers account for 78% of premium, the top 50 carriers for 88% of premium. And my client, as I said, was a top 50 insurance carrier. This is an industry that's going through a number of challenges, right? So we hear all the time on the news, the wildfires in California, flooding in both California and the Southeast, the Northeast. Obviously, I'm based in Miami and lots of hurricane there, hail in the Midwest and whatnot. So all those natural catastrophes have been increasing in severity and frequency, and will only continue to do so, right, with climate change. Additionally, over the past couple of years, there's been obviously inflation, disruption in the supply chain that has made it more costly to reconstruct a property after a disaster or, any type of claim. And so those are some of the challenges facing insurance carriers. Additionally, you have policyholders across, frankly, all ages. It's not just the Gen Z that are, used obviously to the Amazon experience, the Uber experience, and want to have something similar with their insurance carrier. And so I would say, a lot of insurance carriers are grappling with those issues, and my client was as well. So when they came to me, they had 3 goals in mind for this digital transformation project. The first one was they wanted to increase the level of policies that were straight through process. And I will explain a little bit, what this means. Second, they wanted to improve the risk assessment of policies they were about to put on their book. And then third, they wanted to realize a greater investment on their inspection. So maybe let me start with the first goal, which was around straight through processing. And basically, straight through processing is the process of essentially able to review and approve an insurance policy smoothly without any delays or extra requirements, and frankly, without really manual intervention. And typically you achieve that using data analytics, AI-based and technology solutions. So that was the first goal. The second goal, as I said, was around the improved risk assessment. So when you underwrite a policy in the insurance industry, specifically in homeowners, you are looking at specific risk insights. So one would be around the location of the property itself. Is this a property that's located in an area that's prone to flooding or hurricane or hail? Is it an area that's, more exposed to crime than other areas? So this will have an impact in terms of how you underwrite and price that policy. Second is around insights into the property itself. So how old is the roof? What condition is this property? Is there a pool, a trampoline? Are there outdated appliances that can cause, all types of hazards inside the home? And then finally, insights into the policyholders themselves. Are these people that tend to file claims, at the drop of a hat? And that tends to indicate, a greater propensity to file claims, for example. And so my client wanted to figure out what were some of the AI solutions that could help them enhance risk assessment so that there would be less premium leakage. Premium leakage is when an insurance company charges less for a policy than the actual premium should be, but they also wanted to reduce losses, right? Ultimately. So charge the right price for the coverage that's being provided. And then finally, as I said, the inspection process. So right now, carriers spend a ton of money on inspection, and very few of them, will lead to actionable insights. So very often it will be your agent at the end of the day on his way or her way home, stopping by, taking a few pictures, or an actual licensed inspector will come on site. But, we'll just do a quick exterior inspection. And like I said, a few of these will lead actionable insights, and carriers still end up spending quite a bit of money. So I guess I'll walk you through sort of the process we took in this for this digital transformation engagement. The first thing we did was to actually shadow underwriters. And that's one of the favorite parts of any project that I do, is the primary research component of it. And in particular, I love, shadowing the actual users of a solution. So in this case, we shadowed underwriters across both region and seniority. So it was important for me to understand, and my team, how consistently are the underwriting guidelines of this carrier being applied? Is there a difference between how a more junior underwriter is approaching this versus, a more senior underwriter? And that has implications when we talk about change management, when we're introducing new innovative solutions, particularly tech solutions, right, into a process. We also interviewed and benchmarked, if you will, against not only competing carriers, so carriers that were direct competitors, had a similar profile, book of business, but also InsurTech carriers and MGAs that look at this underwriting workflow with a different lens, if you will. And that is important because it can show what I call the art of the possible. Very often, these can be 100-year-old organizations, right, that are stuck in their ways. And it's important to understand what is the art of the possible, but also what is the path to getting there. You don't want to disrupt the workflow to such an extent that, you lose your agents. They recommend other competitors versus you because the change has been too abrupt, too disruptive, and same thing for your policyholders. And so having shadowed the underwriters, done the competitive intelligence benchmarking exercise, we were able to map the workflow as is. The ideal future state from an underwriting workflow perspective. But as I said, you don't want the change to be too abrupt, and it does take a long time, right? Procurement process in the insurance industry is notorious to be very long, as many of those AI vendors will attest. And so we came up with sort of a step in between the as-is state and the future ideal state. And for that middle ground, the intermediary step, we did sort of an analysis to prioritize what were the solutions that we believe would give us the highest return on investment to begin with. And one way we did that was honestly to analyze the claims activities on the book of business to realize, where were the biggest losses coming from? And if we had had a solution in place back then, when we first took this policy on our book of business, would we have been able to avoid those losses, either by, first of all, not even letting that policy in the door, but letting the policy in the door and working hand in hand with the policyholder to mitigate against that risk and be able to offer the proper coverage. And so we were guided by that analysis to understand what were the AI solutions that would have priority from an implementation point of view for that intermediary step. I think one thing that I will add there, Will, that I think is important, I'm obviously, if you cannot tell, I'm actually really passionate about technology, but I also have found over 30 plus engagement around deploying AI solutions and around digital transformation, that change management is also equally important, if not more important. And so there's obviously one side of change management that's around the technology itself, but there is another side to change management that's around people and processes and how ready the organization is to implement these types of new digital tech-driven solutions. And so we were guided by all of that, really to inform our approach. So let me stop there, Will, and see if you have any questions, and then I'll be happy to tell you then how we went about bringing in those AI solutions.
Yeah, let's get to that. And I know you put together a helpful list of questions to ask an AI vendor, and I'd love to have you walk through that as well.
Absolutely. Yes. So I have the benefit because I work at Stratmaven with insurance carriers, data analytics technology vendors, and then private equity firms who tend to invest in those vendors. It gives me sort of a really deep understanding of what solutions work, don't work. And, some of those vendors, I'll readily admit, are customers of mine. And so I had a fairly good understanding of the type of vendors that I wanted my client to engage with. For some of them, I facilitated the introduction. For others, my client already was aware of the vendor, had spoken to them in the past, but not fully engaged. And exactly to your point, one of the things that I did was really to guide my client in asking the right questions. And I think so often, we can be blinded, if you will, a little bit by the next shining objects. Nothing wrong with that. I think that's actually required, again, to think about the art of the possible. But when it comes down to selecting a vendor, an AI vendor, and implementing that solution, it's really important to understand a series of fundamentals about that solutions. And so there are a series of questions that I typically like to ask. So the first one is around the accuracy and the performance of the AI model. So what is the accuracy rate? How does the vendor measure that accuracy rate? And along those sides, right, we want to see how they handle situations where the AI model may not perform as expected. That's actually very important to understand the type of feedback loop that those vendors have in place to incorporate the false positive or the false negatives and learn from that, have their AI algorithm learn from that. The second one is around model explainability, what I call the black box phenomenon. Because the insurance industry is highly regulated, and it's regulated at the state level. So 50 different state regulations. And, a lot of our insurance regulators are not necessarily data scientists and modelers. And so you have to really watch out for AI model opacity, if you will. And so the real test for me is, can an AI vendor explain the decision-making process of their models in a way that is understandable to non-experts? And so that's one of the tests that I use. The third one is around the model bias and fairness. And how does the vendor address and mitigate biases in their AI models? And I'm particularly so happy to see regulatory actions that are being taken even in the United States, in Europe, around ethical AI, AI safety. And even in the insurance industry, I see many of the newer AI solution vendors really incorporate that into the decision-making process of their models. And I only think this will increase, as more innovations happen in AI. And that's really critical. The fourth one is around, I would say, scalability. So there is quite a bit of solutions that I would say are vaporware. And so obviously you don't want those, but there are solutions that are not vaporware that have legitimate, awesome, beautiful AI technology, but they are not what I call enterprise grade.
And I'm sorry, what do you mean by the term vaporware?
Vaporware meaning it's not real. Like it's more of a canned demo that the vendor will present to you, but it's not really proven, the AI models. So a lot of people will throw the word AI in their brochure, their marketing materials, because they want to create that buzz. But deep down, when you look into it, it's not the real thing. On the flip side, as I was saying, you do have solutions that are the real thing, but they are not what I call enterprise grade. So they cannot really deploy them at scale. With an increase in data and user load, the model falls apart. And that is actually critical for an insurance company, right? Especially when you think of new business, you have tons of quotes coming in. Not all those quotes will obviously end up in being a bind policy or a sold policy, but you do have to account for that volume. Another area that's important is, nowadays, a lot of those AI solutions have to be able to be integrated through API into a carrier's stack. And, that can be applied to other industry as well, right? You could imagine the same thing in banking, in ag tech and whatnot. And so it's helpful, right, when an AI solution is already pre-integrated with other technology stacks that a carrier leverages already, right? It speeds up the deployment, and it's one more way to verify, right, that the solution has been successfully deployed and leveraged by others in the industry. There are other things other questions that I asked, but the last one, you're just in the interest of time, that I think is important, is the maintenance and support of those AI models. What kind of ongoing maintenance and support does the vendor provide? How do they handle updates and upgrades to their AI model? And as I said, how do you incorporate that feedback, right, from the users to continuously improve your AI models? And that is very often, I've worked with some carriers that will say, given the price of implementation or licensing the solution, isn't it worth our while? We have enough data to build the solution in-house. And unless you're State Farm or Allstate, some of the top 5 carriers where you may have enough data to build those solutions in-house. And even then, I think depending on the use case, yes, it might make sense for you to build it in-house. But generally speaking, I believe that licensing data from a vendor is the right path, precisely because of that ongoing maintenance that's required. And we're just seeing it now, right? We're just seeing AI vendors that, we're leveraging computer vision, for example, right, which is a form of artificial intelligence, or, natural language processing, NLP. They are now starting to incorporate those large language models, right, the ChatGPT type of AI solutions. And so these things will only continue to evolve. More AI techniques, if you will emerge. And that's not the core competency of an insurance carrier. The core competency of an insurance carrier is to assess risk. And so I believe that, leaving that to the vendors is important. But likewise, when you're selecting a vendor, it's really important to understand those various elements that we've discussed.
Wow, that what you just gave by itself is a fantastic mini resource, that questions to ask an AI vendor.
Oh, I'm glad that's helpful, Will. And yes, and in your audience, if they want to reach out and ask any questions, I would be happy to do that. I'll just quickly, again, just at least to give a sense of what the results were. This is a fairly new project, so we are 16 months in. One thing that I will say as well, and I think this is across any industry, but it's not to think that you're going to turn on a solution on day one and the magic will happen. A bunch of new business will flood in, or you will reduce your expense line overnight through automation. These things take time. There's a sequence to deploying those solutions. But we are already seeing quite a bit, very impactful results. I mentioned the straight-through processing. So my client has already been able to go from 45% straight-through process to 75%. That is absolutely remarkable results. So that means, right, manual interventions being drastically reduced, operational efficiency is soaring, and honestly, better risk assessment in the process. Because what I observed when I was shadowing those underwriters, even though they were following the underwriting guidelines of my client, but two underwriters could actually come up with two different solutions. And I think when you're introducing AI solutions, there is definitely more consistency and more accuracy in how a particular risk is being assessed. And so we've definitely seen increased new business. And I believe they will see an improvement in their loss ratio and so forth. And from an inspection point of view, which was the third point that I had mentioned, they are in the process right now of testing solutions that are basically phone-based solutions where the policyholder can basically scan the exterior and interior of their property, send that to the carrier. And so that reduces costs, speed up the process, but it also frankly provide more actionable results as well. But that solution has not yet been deployed, but I think will be very promising for my client.
Astrid, thank you for this case study, and you made my job easy on this one. You had thought through it so deeply. This was really amazing overview. By itself, your list of questions around, how to judge an AI vendor is super valuable. And we'll include, if it's okay with you, those questions in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Where can listeners find more about your firm?
Absolutely. So they can go to our website, www.stratmaven.com. And also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. So Astrid Malval-Beharry.
Great. We will include your LinkedIn URL as well as your firm's website in the show notes. Astrid, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Will. It was a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.